that you would like to do so that you can take most advantage here. It's a nice position. Feels like we've got good opportunities, but what's the best? Now, what you got to remember is that if you restrict your opponent, and if you have a nice type of position, you can do plenty of different things. But I believe the most valuable thing is that we consider a way to restrict, a way to limit him, a way to exchange or deliver any sorts of combinations as quickly as possible without any type of delay. This is very necessary. White knew that. And that is actually a rule that was given by Capablanca. Capablanca was one of the greatest players of the positional chess. And he said, if you have pressure, if you have a good initiative, if you have a good control, and you don't use it in time, you will lose that pressure, that initiative, and the control. And you won't be able to get it back. And so this is a really interesting way of thinking, because most chess players believe that everything is about a beautiful move and something like that. It isn't. See, what these positions are about, they are about our opportunity to keep a good tension and to develop it, to make it go further, to make it go more powerful by simply pressuring, or causing more issues to the opponent. So this was a very good move, actually, that White did. E5 was an excellent choice. It forced him to go backward. It made him to defend and stay behind with his pieces, and yeah, it surely looked good. So after this candidate, I have to admit that there isn't too much that Black can do. Of Bishop h6, an excellent move. It kind of calms down with the attack. Black plays b4, and then White does knight a4. See, the e5 and d4 are great pawns in the middle. They just help a lot. It's an excellent support. Let's keep Black's pieces down until we get ready, or we get enough forces to keep up with the pressure. Knight a4 was great, and surely it felt right too. So bishop takes h6, queen takes h6, and bishop a6. What about that now? I mean, obviously we've limited the opponent quite a bit, so it feels the right thing to maybe exchange, or I don't know, like deliver some threats. Most people would say exchange. Other people would say, deliver some threats. And third kind of people will say we have to find a way to restrict. But the truth is that all the three choices will be wrong, because there's something more that we want out of this position. There's something much more significant. There's something a lot more valuable. See, we neither want to exchange, we neither can create threats. We want to create threats, but we can't. Nor we can restrict the opponent much more in the conventional way. What you've got to do in these kind of positions is to find out a way, to find an opportunity, to find a possible chance to attack him. If you have the initiative or the pressure, you want to transform it into an attack. Because if you're not that fast, he's going to find a way to consolidate the position. He's going to secure his pieces and the control, and you will be losing. So what you would like to do is to take advantage, get a chance, and keep pressing against this position. Now, is it going to be easy? No, it is not. And it's normal why it is not going to be easy. But we want it. And that is exactly why White came up with the beautiful and yet very relevant idea of pawn to h4. And what was the reason for this type of move to happen in reality? Well, actually, the move pawn to h4 helps White. He's going to go for h5. He's going to look forward to the ability of opening up the rook and the queen all together. And that was great, really. I mean, after h4, Black chose to exchange on the e2. But then after the exchange that happened in this moment, then White was in a good position after the exchange. Then there was king takes e2, knight a6, and pawn h5. So it helps White to get ready and take and get the control over that line. Black plays knight f8, and then White does a move like rook a to c1 in this position, which feels brilliant. Rook a c1, forcing a threat against the c6, a chance of h takes g, and every single piece feels right where it needs to be. Rook a7, Okay, so obviously I know what you're going to be thinking. I know that you're going to say, Valerie, this is crazy. I don't want to have my king standing like that. It feels bad, and it's like it's in a bad position. It's hanging, and like every single piece that black has is around it. So how can I expect that this is going to be good? And the real answer to that question is that in a lot of occasions, in a lot of situations, we can try to get away. So like the thing is that after the move of rook to a7, you don't have to care so much about whether you have to protect something or not. Rather think about whether your opponent can attack against it, because in a lot of times you will see that maybe there is a weakness indeed. But if there is no chance for anyone to attack or exploit it short term, then you don't have to worry. There is nothing important that can happen. There's nothing valuable that black can do against that king in order to deliver threats or make complications. I was very well aware of that, and you did know that the king is pretty secure at the moment, and everything looks solid. So after the exchange and rook a2, I think no matter what type of tactics we look for black, they're just one word. Naturally, Petrosian just gets out of the motive in time, so that there are no there are no more like problems and things that he's got to worry about. And so after the move of king to f2, knight e6, h takes to the g6, f takes g6, and rook h4, everything feels solid, and now white simply keeps going. Now what? Okay, so we realize that there are two kinds of restriction we can apply. The first is when you restrict him with pawns and everything, and the second is when you can ultimately choose to make more pressure or begin an attack, and that's how you also limit your opponent, because the only thing you have is to just go back and start defending. So this is all a very, very good idea. But what do we have to keep in mind if it comes down to a position like this? What's the right thing, or what's the right way to go on? Now, whatever type of restriction you're thinking about, don't ever forget that one of the key secrets and things that you want to have in mind lies within the possibility to coordinate your pieces. Coordination often means the chance for you to get two or more pieces together and set problems or threats over to your opponent. It's a very interesting idea, and it's something that could be of an utmost importance towards such positions. Now, how to do it is, of course, a good question. So let's talk about that. How do we do that kind of thing? How do we make sure that we got probably some, attack or something like this? Is it even possible? Yes, it is, and I'm going to tell you how. Coordination is when the pieces work together, and not only, but they can produce threats. What white did in here was the move of rook to g4, with which he's basically attacking with both the queen, the rook, and maybe even getting ready to deliver the knight into the attack that way. It was powerful, because even though black may seem to have a defense, and that's kind of solid at for the most part, the defense is a defense. It can never be as important as the attack. So does it mean that if a certain player has more defenders, it will still be weaker than the attack? Yes, it does. In a lot of occasions, the actual defense turns out to lose because it is just a defense, because it is really not enough so that he could have, or he could hold, a sufficient protection over his position that way. And so ultimately, after the move of rook to f8, white did the most brilliant move that you'd really like to find. So I'm not gonna spoil the surprise. Please take a moment and think about what should white play in this moment. I think the real key is that we break. Rook takes g6 was a very beautiful continuation in this case. And then ultimately, after the move of rook takes to the g, h takes to the g6, then ultimately white found the opportunity to play with the move queen takes to the g6. There was a hit on the e6, and then when black played knight g7, rook to h1, it's black he's having a rook up, and yet he's losing because of it. Isn't it incredible? A rook up and losing. Why? It's because it's not important what pieces you got. It's important what your pieces can do. The problem of black right now is that although he was alright, lots of his pieces were simply on the downside, completely unable to join the fight and do anything useful, to be anyhow useful. He just knew that, but there was nothing that he could do to change it. This is the problem. So in a lot of positions like this, you just have to remember and understand that the secret lies within the ability to, I would say it, like, limit the opponent, okay, restrict him. And when you do that, it's like whatever plans you go with, he's just not going to be in the right condition to stop you or hold you. White knew that, and of course that's why his attack works. Rook h1, black did rook to f4 in that case, sorry, rook to f4, but then white's continuation is knight h5, and then after rook to f7 there is e6. We understand that the threats are just way too many, especially including the one against the g7 knight, the rook, and threats like knight f6, which I surely say are brilliant. You know, checkmates fly around and all over the space. So there was not much that he could do really. After 27, rook h1, this was the end. Black tried rook f4, knight h5, rook c to f7, and e6, after which he gave up, simply because it's impossible to stop the threat against f4, g7, and so on. It's a very good example which illustrates three things of Petrosian's technique. Number one, he was able to constantly try to restrict the opponent in variety of different ways. Number two, he loved the coordination of the pieces. He never was trying to attack with just one piece or two. He was trying to apply as much support for each of his pieces as possible. And then the third thing is he was playing actively. Remember that the best restriction and limitation to your opponent's possibilities are the threats you can create. The more threats you make, the harder it becomes for him to deliver his own plans and ideas. And it was so beautifully executed by Petrosian in that game. So I hope you like this game, and you can apply some of these little concepts in your next games. So thank you again. This was International Master Valeri Lilov for chesslecture.com, and I'll speak to you again very soon.